Hey yo, let's go. Hmm. Alright, let's see how the lag is. Hey, not too bad, alright.
First of all,
Ah, fuck it. Let's play some Warzone. Let's hang out. Not too bad of an idea. See what we got going on here.
I'll be blunt. I went to India to kill myself. In a way, I got my wish. Life had become a bleak and gray thing that looked to be a prison woven out of countless invisible strands. Money, cubicle, bad food, bad sleep. I was 2 years out of college and seeing the rest of my years float straight ahead with no deviation and no freedom. Raised on video games and television, I was now expected to suddenly fit into a drone-like routine. Wake up far earlier than I'd ever had before. Sit at work going crazy from boredom for 9 hours, then drive home to eat, sleep, and do it all over again.
10 G's.
Was this really life?
It's great.
I held out for another year before I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be a cog in a machine. But our world is not kind to young men who refuse the system. Every day on the way to work, I saw homeless people and how they were treated. I wouldn't go out like that. No, that was just a slow suicide all its own. I'd always been fascinated by television shows about other countries, so I chose my favorite, and I spent the remainder of my bank account.
Hey, it actually works. Alright, let's go, baby. Let's go, baby.
I was lucky to even have this box, really. As a foreigner, as someone with no money, had someone put me inside it as an act of kindness? If they just thrown me in a pit and buried me, I'd have been dead already. That logic didn't help keep the panic back more than a few seconds. I began screaming and beating at the thin wood with all my strength. Bits of dirt sifted from above, but I kept attacking the wood until it began pouring down like the grains in an hourglass. The air was stale and suffocating, but I had no better plan. I would either die now or find... Yes, they hadn't buried me deep at all, maybe a few inches. Sunlight. I could see sunlight and air. Air flowed in. Oh, God. The sweetest breath despite the choking dirt in the air. I screamed for help. There was no reply. Was I in some sort of graveyard? Of course, I had to be. My shout had to be, in reality, a small whimper. Nobody would ever hear it.
Oh, I should plug this motherfucker in.
I didn't hear anyone. Every so often, I shouted as loud as I could. The light outside dimmed, went dark, then reappeared over the course of a cold night. That morning, it began to rain. A little bit of water trickled down, and I drank as much as I possibly could. The box creaked as the dirt above grew heavier, and I was forced to roll onto my back and prop up my weak roof with my knees. I wasn't strong enough to bash my way up,
So
but
fucking
it
funny.
could certainly fall in on
What's
me and
up,
crush
corn,
me.
man?
How do I convey what it's like to be buried alive?
Probably
Every story
sucks.
I've ever read or movie I've seen focuses on the initial terror of waking up underneath the earth, forgotten. That passed quickly. The era after that was an endless one of waiting, thinking, and guessing. Do I shout now? Do I wait? Do I conserve my strength and try to break up through the surface when the dirt dries out? I hope it doesn't rain so the earth will dry, but I hope it does rain so I won't die of thirst. But I also hope it doesn't rain too hard or I'll drown. And always, 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 the box is present, like part of your body. No matter what position you choose, you can feel every single side of it. It's right there with you like a shell, like a second skin. You come to know every knot and grain in the dark. You even repair it and prop it up with your own strength, even though it is a damned thing that you are trapped inside. The box is dead, but the box is also life. For 2 days it didn't rain. Then, right about noon, judging by the initial brightness of my sole beam of light, a new darkness joined me in the box. I thought someone had walked over my grave and I began shouting, but no. It was a thunderstorm. I prayed. You bet I prayed. I'd never been a religious guy before, but please, please, I said, please keep that rain to a little drizzle. When an inch of water had built up around me in my box, I knew it was time to act.
God dang it.
It was do or die. I'd practiced a pose worthy of Cirque du Soleil, and I got into it now, bare feet planted solidly in that
Alright, where do I go?
Arms out, arms curled
Industries,
under, back against the
prison,
ceiling,
factory.
all inside a box
Go to
about 2
factory,
feet high.
as usual.
I pushed.
Fuck it.
The wood cut into my back, but I pressed with all the strength left in my legs. There was a small
Kinda fun.
give above, as if I was making a little bump in the dirt where some person might see it. I strained so hard, put so much of myself into that attempt that I felt nothing else. I envisioned myself bursting free.
These guys want to go to bioweapons?
That's all I had to do. My body gave
Nah,
out first,
pooch.
and I rolled onto my back to rest for a second try. Something up there had moved. I knew I could do it, given time. But the box betrayed me, and it caved in on top of me. Dirt poured in, and I fruitlessly fought the flow. I put my mouth to a narrow air hole in an attempt to avoid suffocation.
Oh, hell yeah.
All that did was leave me completely trapped and totally unable to move while the wet dirt squeezed in over my eyes and around my neck. I was entirely encased in dirt except for my mouth, which was open to the air, and the rain was intensifying. I drank as much of the rainwater as I could. I even began eating traces of the mud it brought down with it. Anything I could do to keep the narrow hole in the ground above clear. Eventually, though, the rain overtook me and I was forced to close my mouth and hold my breath.
Die, bitch.
That was it then. There were no more plays, no more tries. I'd come to India to die, even tried to kill myself with pills, and yet here I was, fighting desperately down to the very last second just to cling to life 1 moment longer. I was immobile underground with a funnel of rainwater growing heavier on my closed mouth. How long could Olympic divers hold their breath? I'd seen a show once while flipping through the channels. Was it 3 minutes? Was it 4? God, the pressure on my chest. I hadn't even gotten a full breath. 60, 61, 62, 63. I knew I was nearing my limit. What did I want to spend the last minute or two of my life thinking about? Girls I dated? My favorite movies? It was all nothing, but it was everything. Every mundane little thing in the entire world was now a luxury I would never have again. I would stroke the fabric of my cubicle at my boring job, if only to see it again. To breathe one more time. Thunder struck overhead so loud that I could hear it even in my prison of mud. I wish I could say that at the last moment the hillside gave way under the fury of that monsoon and spilled me out onto a mudslide of corpses. That's what law enforcement and doctors insisted on when I tried to tell them the truth. To them, I was just a crazy foreigner that had been traumatized by being buried alive. They refused to listen. Because I was not saved at that last second by the weather. In fact, I wasn't saved at all. I counted to 140 before my awareness started to hollow out into shimmering white. Keep my mouth closed. Keep my mouth closed. Keep my mouth closed. Keep my mouth closed. Water, dirt, mud, pressure. Keep my mouth closed. That was all that remained. If you open your mouth, you die. But if you don't breathe, you also die. No choices. Something was tugging at me just before I gave in. Something was pulling at me. Not from above, but from below. Chill iciness wrapped around my limbs and began to pull me down. I remember the spray of released rainwater as it shot down from the hole where it built up. Then I was dragged through the earth at a breakneck pace. Keep my mouth shut. Keep my mouth shut. No longer. I let out dead air and gasped. Somehow I was alive. I'd been deposited somewhere full of soft round lumps and hard straight lines. The air here was breathable, but horribly foul. For as much as I'd wanted to escape darkness, I let myself just be alive for a few minutes. I think I knew something was wrong, but it wouldn't begin until I opened my eyes. Finally, I was fully conscious again. Still dark, no light. I began to crawl along the acrid piles. Long, solid objects clacked hollowly against one another. Big, round, soft lumps rolled as I pushed my way across. As I went, I began to suspect, but didn't truly know, until my hand fell upon the unmistakable lay of a cold nose and mouth. The human head rolled away down the pile of bones as I crawled over. I saw nothing, but I knew. Had the graveyard somehow rotted underneath? Had the rainwater deposited all the bodies down in some sort of cave? I was alive, at least for the moment, but this was somehow worse than the box. At least in the box, I could shout and pray someone would hear me. If I was in a corpse-filled sinkhole, well, there was nothing to do but starve. A fate which would take years if new bodies were continuously sliding down into my muddy prison every time it rained. God, what if I never died? What if enough water and human meat made it down here to keep me alive for decades? Could I really eat a corpse? Funny, I hadn't actually cried while in that box. In that box, everything was simple. Here, loneliness and starvation would turn me into a monster. I crawled around that sinkhole for hours, testing each side of the massive pit. The sides were solid dirt, packed hard by ancient geological processes. There was a small span of time where I considered building some sort of scaffolding out of bones. There were certainly enough, and tons of clothes and hair to tie them off with. It was a grim thought, but seemingly the only way out. Until the door opened. There was no light, I only heard it. In that sinkhole, there were only two sounds. The water draining away into a narrow creek between two hard plates of rock, and me. After at least 2 days down there, I knew the moment the door opened. It was nothing but a soft sigh of smooth metal and warm air, but I began moving toward it immediately. There was also a fourth sound. Something moved among the piles of bodies, sending bones scattering and heads rolling. It was swift and mostly silent, and it dragged something back out. I chased after it and dove into the gap that hadn't been there before. I got inside before it closed. Metal. Warm metal. It was still pitch black, but I could feel smooth, warm metal under my hands. Maintenance shaft, I guessed, but for what? Had some animal found a grate in the sewers and given me my escape? I felt behind me, but the door was solid metal, not a grate, and covered with unfamiliar sleek patterns. Checking it, I found that I could push it open if I wanted to. It opened only from the inside, and I had somehow missed it while feeling the sides of the sinkhole. I could go back if I wanted to, but to hell with that. I turned and started crawling ahead. There was really no way to tell how long the warm and smooth metal tunnel was. I'd been in the darkness so long that I'd lost all sense of direction and time. I crawled until my hands and feet were too weak to move, and then I stumped along with my elbows and knees. This was going somewhere. This had to be going somewhere. I slept encased in warmth. When I put my head to a soft, round hump of metal, I could hear a rising and falling humming, as if everything around me were alive, asleep, and breathing softly somewhere deep in the distance. How long had I been underground by then? A week? For the first time in a week, I found light. When I awoke and kept crawling again on sore hands, I finally
gotta go
emerged
save this
into an
guy.
open chamber. that
Boy, I
held
got
its
you,
own
I got
dim
you.
gray ambient glow. As happy as I was to finally see again,
Where are you?
and even then, only the
where'd
barest
he go?
darkness that
How'd
any
he
normal
die?
human eye would have seen
Damn it.
as pitch black had they not spent a week underground craving light. I also knew I was not nearly home, nor safe.
So,
Here,
bitch.
the sleek metal tubes of the tunnel expanded to form a sort of rectangular mortuary. There was no
Shit.
floor, only a maze of pipes overlapping one another. The pipes bulged upward in place in a series of table-like formations. On these knotted biers rested 6 corpses in various stages of decay. 2 of the tables were empty.
What's up, bitch?
Yeah, from bad to worse. But my time buried alive had beaten all fear out of me. Death was no longer the worst possible outcome. I had to keep going. The chamber had multiple ways out, and none of them looked official. I crawled up into a pipe-lined hole and hid there as I heard something sighing outside a larger gap. As I squeezed myself tighter and tighter into shadow, I watched an enormous, organic, metallic hand on 1,000 juxtaposition joints slide in without a sound and then pick up the farthest corpse in the row. From the sound, I knew that this was what had entered my sinkhole. This was what had stolen a corpse. This had reached all the way down that interminable tunnel on its endless metal-jointed arm, and now it was taking one of the bodies to another chamber. Creeping by sourceless, gray, barely light, I moved down the subtly pulsing tunnel beyond, following the arm as it receded into gloom. It was dangerous, and my heart threatened to pound through my ribcage, but now I had nowhere else to go. I only barely caught my breath as I came face to face with the human skull, and I nearly screamed. Set into the wall, no, part of the wall. It gaped with open eyes at nothing. Tubes of a dozen different variants, all smooth chrome, had entered it through the ears, mouth, and spinal cord area. The ends of those connections gleamed as spikes and fluid carriers. Had they once connected to something? Moving on, I followed the curve of the wide metallic cave until I reached what looked like twin operating rooms. A steel bush of micro-arms hovered over a pipe bulge bier within each room, picking and clawing at a corpse on each table. No, not picking at. I crept closer, wary of that greater arm that had deposited the left body and then departed somewhere. The body on the left table was long decayed, but tiny claws and surgical instruments on arms between 6 and 10 feet long appeared to be dipping into a wide bath in the floor filled with random pieces of human flesh, and then carefully applying those pieces to the skull of the dead patient. I slipped and tumbled into the room, nearly sliding into the vat of flesh, but gripped warm metal at the last second. Had I been caught? No. The surgical arms never even so much as slowed. They didn't care at all about me. I hugged the wall, knowing the same might not be true for that bigger arm. As I watched, the arms reconstructed the face of a human being. They did not rebuild his hair or skin, only the muscles around his skull, and then 2 eyes were plucked from the vat and inserted with great care. For the first time since I'd been buried alive, I felt vaguely not alone. Although the eyes just stared straight up, they had no eyelids, and as yet, no muscles to move them. What did these machines do? The arms began filling the inner portions of the skull where I could not see. Then they flitted quickly down the table, piercing together a spine and the core of a nervous system. Between the ribs, and the next things they fused together were two different lung sacs from the vat. A small arc of electricity shocked the heart placed in between. The head, lungs, heart, and ribcage on the table began screaming. Loud echoes of terror and shock radiated out from our organic metal surgery room. I froze in absolute terror for an eternal moment, and then jumped forward. I hissed, "Shut up, it'll hear you!" The muscle-bound skull could not move, but the eyes sitting within did. Ever so slightly, those irises focused on me. Its windpipe moved visibly between its skull and septum. Its lungs contracted with the effort. It said something in Hindi.
Dead.
I put a finger to my lips. Shh. The reanimated half-body said one more sentence in Hindi, then closed its jutting jaw to signal it would remain silent. Was it a man or woman? What had it said? It watched me sidelong with terrified eyes as I climbed into the other operating room. The same thing was happening there, but the process was not as far along. The machines here were pulling from a vat filled with bone fragments and rebuilding a spinal column below a cracked skull. I must have rocked back and forth for a solid minute as the insanity of what I was seeing overwhelmed me. What the hell was this? I must have gone insane. I was still in that sinkhole. No. Whenever I turned and looked over my shoulder, I could see those horrific muscle-ringed eyes. I would do something. The surgical arms continued their work, adding more system. The arms had seen fit to ignore me so far, but it was too dangerous to interfere with their work. To that man or woman on the table, I whispered, "I'll come back for you." I waited for a nod, listened to a third sentence in Hindi, then headed on. I repeated the foreign syllables in my mind, hoping to memorize them and translate them later if I ever saw civilization again. Who knew what terrible secrets that reanimated man or woman had seen? The curve continued, taking me through a cathedral-like area where pools of black water stank under a ribcage of thick metal bones dripping ichor from ancient tubing. The light here was still barely perceptible, and so thin that I had to move my head back and forth to make out shapes. But it was definitely shifting from gray to blue as I climbed across the vast valley. At no place and no junction were there